Okay, this is probably going to be quite a lengthy video looking at multimeters and version 2.9.0.8 of Thetis pre-release this is. So I imagine that's 2906 or 2907. I've backed up my database. I'm just going to uninstall Thetis. I've also downloaded 2908 from the GitHub repository, which is here. So I'm going to install this. I'm just going to go typical, install it, and you'll see as well we're installing some meter skins from Ernst OE3 IDE, who has helped out quite a lot with testing and providing all the imagery for this version. Just quickly going to show you the folder that gets added. So it's in C users, your username, app data, roaming, and then it's in OpenHPSDR and meters. So it adds this folder. Ignore these; those are just testing. And it adds these images, which are all Ernst images. You've got the various ones, including the magic eye. So let's just start this up. We're going to quickly go through the various config options and how you can set all this up, and it can be tailored entirely to your heart's content, really. There are lots and lots of options. So we start this up. I just quickly want to mention the Ukraine flag thing. The support for Ukraine, it's optional now, so you can turn it off and on as the program starts up. If you're a streamer and you want to show support, you can have it on, of course. And I've added a little tooltip for poor Ivan, who was trying to defend his hometown and passed away. UR8 GX, Uniform Romeo 8 Golf X-Ray. So there we are. Okay, so meters. We all know about these meters here, which are your receiver side and your transmit ones. I haven't made any changes to any of this at all, so that exists as is. However, if you go into Appearance, Multimeters, we now see this new view. There is a notion in these multimeters of a container. So a container, and there can be a total of 10 spread however you want between the two receivers, RX1 and RX2. Incidentally, you can only add an RX2 container if RX2 is enabled, and you will only see RX2 containers if RX2 is enabled. So I'll add a container by clicking on this button, and what happens when you do that, it will add a box that you can move around, which is a container. You can resize it. You can float it out of the window totally, so it can now be moved or put on different monitors or whatever you want. You can put it back, so it's now within Thetis. If we move Thetis around, it moves around. I'll quickly cover this arrow. So the arrow defines which edge of Thetis it's trying to maintain its distance from. So for instance, if you had a nice meter setup and you always wanted it top left there, in that sort of corner, you could leave that on the pointing top left, which maintains this gap and this gap. And if we resize now, you'll see that it doesn't move. So it's stuck there. If you wanted it over here, however, and you did that with that option, it will stay in place. So what you have to do is rotate the arrow, so it's now maintaining this gap and this gap, like so. And if you wanted it down here, you could spin this all the way around to point here, so it's maintaining these edges. So that's the idea behind the arrow, if you want boxes internal to the window. The other option on this floating floating container is always on top, which is this pin here. So if it's pinned down, which is like tacked, then it will literally stay on top of everything. And if you untack it, it's like that. So that's how that works. Anyway, okay, so let's get back onto this. We'll give us some space there. We will configure some meters. So there obviously there can be up to 10, as I mentioned, of these containers. So we could add another container which would appear here, and we could undock it straight away and we could put it underneath this one. So we've now got 2 containers, which incidentally can be on separate monitors or whatever you want. They can be any size, they can be very small or the whole screen. It's entirely up to you. So we've got 2 containers now. Container 1, which is using settings and values, using measurements from TRX1, and we've also got a second container which is using measurements from the same TRX, as I've called it. So we've got all these available. The ones with the green on the side are receive, transmit, and then special ones down here, such things like a clock. So if we're on container 1, I'll highlight container 1, so that's container 1. Container 2, we can change the color of the background. Let's turn the highlight off, highlight again, and we can turn the border off if we don't want a border on there. There are reasons why you might want to get rid of them if you want things in these blank spaces on your screen, that type of thing. Get rid of the border so it doesn't stand out, all sorts of things. So let's add a meter. We can click on a meter. These are the ones that are available on the left, and these are the ones that are in use. So we can use this right arrow to put them in. We can use this left arrow to take them out, or we can just double click them, which does the same thing. So as you see, I've got an average signal strength meter there. Let's add a few more. So we've got all those meters, which are all pulling their data, and they're all in sort of pseudo-random colors, where I've just been testing and haven't made each one the same, but it's fairly easy to do with the pipette and the paintbrush option. So you can move these up and down. You can reposition them however you like. You can get rid of ones that you're not interested in. Some of them, you'll notice, have got 2. They've got an indicator and a sub-indicator color. And for instance, this ADC one, the orange bar is the peak. The grey bar, as it's coloured here, although you could convert it to whatever colour you wanted, is the average. So I didn't create separate bars for peak and average for things like the ADC. Separate meters, I should say. That it's combined for that type of thing, like EQ, a couple of others, AGC peak. There's also got AGC average in there as well, so there's a few like that. Okay, so let's get back to having a look at this. If we want to align all the colours the same, say you made some sort of nice design, I'm not saying that this one is, we make that sort of colour for the low, then we go bright green for the high. We don't want show history, we'll use a peak hold instead, so that's the red bar that you can see behind there. So if we move this onto there, you'll see that the peak hold is holding, and that's the peak value there, 64.2 dBm negative. The time that it stays there is defined by this value, history. So if you wanted a very short peak hold, you could put 500 in there, and as you can see, that's half a second peak. If you want 10 seconds of peak, 10,000. So yeah, it's entirely customizable, and I think that can actually go up to 30 seconds. There are attack and decay times. So attack time, it's this. So if the value coming in from the reading is greater than where we currently are, that's how much of 80% of the new reading that will be used to apply to it. So essentially, you could, if you put 1 in here, when a new reading came in, it would instantly jump up to there. If you put a decay of 0, it would never drop. So it's now essentially like a permanent max hold, peak hold. So set this to 2 and it'll, sorry, 0.2. And it will drop down if you set this to about 0.8. And those are the standard values that are used in the old meter, 0.8 and 0.2. There is also an update time, so we could have 200 millisecond delay on this top bar. As you can see how steppy it is now. And these are all running at 50, I do believe, yeah, 50. So they're 20 times a second, whereas the top one is 5 times a second. The refresh in terms of DirectX and the graphics card on this will always be at the speed of the fastest meter. So currently the whole thing is redrawing 20 times a second. However, the reading is only being used up on signal average once every 200 milliseconds. So that reduces the load essentially on the WDSP module from Warren that does all the calculations for all this stuff. If we were to set this to 100, which would be 10 times a second, it's a lot smoother. If we were to remove all these, incidentally you can do that by using the left arrow. So just use the left arrow to take them out, or you can just double click them. That signal strength text is a special one, which is using the same S-meter algorithm or range for each S-meter reading as this old meter, just to keep it the same. And I fixed the position of the S part, and I append that bit on the end so it's not jumping around like this one does. And this is the peak hold down the bottom, and we can turn the peaks off if we don't want them. At the moment there's no way to turn these additional values off, but what you can do, because it's a sub, you can set the colour to the same as the background. The background at the moment, we'll change the background to that, and then we can make the sub the same background so they disappear, and then we could get rid of peak. And that would just be the S meter there. So yes, so everything can be changed. Let's get rid of that text. You can reposition them, of course, as well. So if you want to change the order, you can. You can see it easier with this one. So you can set the order to however you like. And at the moment, we're only using this top container. So if I highlight that container, like so, I can turn the border off. I can change its background color if you wanted to do some special colored layout. And we can also switch to container 2 on the same receiver. So now if I highlight it, we'll highlight the bottom one, so I can change this with the mouse wheel. And we can put a different meter in here, so we could use a special one like the VFO display. Let's get rid of this border, this highlight. And if, for instance, somebody had visual impairment or whatever, and they had their screen set up like so, you could configure this bar to show really big VFOs. And potentially I will be adding a way to mouse wheel these values or change them. At the moment they're entirely just a visual representation. We're receiving on just RX. If we do multi-RX, then that one lights up as well. If we go to here, we obviously got split on. And if we TX, let's just set this to no power. If we were to MOX here now, then that lights up, and if we were to run the split, that one lights up. Something to notice, these are displaying history. So if we look at the signal, container 1 signal is showing history. We can show that, change that to show peak hold. So there's the orange peak, the red peak hold line. You could change that if you wanted. But what I was going to say is, history is very awkward to gather when the DSP and the radio WDSP is obtaining new values, because the essentially when the radio state is changed, you'll see this yellow bar on the old meter. You saw it then when it came back on. You can see it sort of step. It's basically gathering data to come to where it needs to be. So unless you have sort of an idle time, and if you notice this red here, when I MOX, it disappears because these are receives. But if I take MOX off, you'll notice that the red is not being gathered. The history is not being gathered for a certain amount of time when you change MOX state, or when band changes, this type of thing. So if I go to 40, see how it's disappeared, and then it appears, and then when I go to 80 it's cleared again. And this value here defines that, so how long it ignores for. So if I set that to 500 milliseconds now, and I change bands, see it came in much quicker. And in fact you can set this to 0. So you can see what happens if you don't do this clearing. See how we've essentially filled the bar up, and we go the other way and we've filled the bar up with history. So if we put to 100, see that's coming back too quick. It's actually appearing before it gets to the bottom. So you can tailor these however you like. 500 seemed okay. And they will be based, the speed at which they get to where they need to be is based on this attack decay ratio. So it's all configurable. You can do things like fade on. So fade on transmit. So that's a receive meter. So I can tick this on, fade on transmit. If I transmit, it's now dimmed away. So you can do all that sort of stuff. And if we had let's put a mic in, mic meter, 1 2 1 2. We can have a fade on receive on it, so that dims away as well. And of course you can change all the colors. So let's make this top one different. So low will be that color, high will be bright. We'll not use history, we'll use a segmented bar of, well, some sort of non-clashing color, but you can spend forever on this sort of stuff if you wanted. So say we come up with some nice color scheme, which obviously this is not, but what you can do then is you can pipette this, take a copy of all these settings, and you can apply them anytime this is black. It is grey there, so you can't do it to the signal text meter, but you could do it to the mic. So let's go down this list. Let's put that on there. Put that on there, so it saves having to set up each one. You can just take a copy of one you like and apply it everywhere. So that's that. Right, let's quickly put this VFO display in. And what I want to do is create. So this is RX1 VFO in big, and this is RX1 VFO over here, A and B. If we go to TX, of course, it's changing there, changing there. If we change this number, it changes in both places. Let's add RX2 into the mix. Add an RX2 container. Well, we already had one. Let's get rid of that. Let's find out where this one is. Oh, that is RX. Sorry, that's alright. TRX1, TRX2, 1. So those are both RX1. Let's add an TRX2. So if we look up here, it'll say RX2. Let's undock this. And we will also put in here a VFO display. And as you can see, in RX1, VFO-B has disabled, essentially vanished, because we all know that in RX1, when you're using two RXs, VFO-B relates to RX2, which is down there. And it's changing here, and if we change the band to 40 on RX2, we'll see it change here. We change the mode on RX2, it changed, and also the filter width. So that's all happening. Now if we were to turn on multi-RX, we would get another receiver on VFO-A, sorry, RX1, so let's do that. And as you can see, it's now turned to VFO sub up here. And another mad thing you can do, you can actually do a split on this. So let's so there's the frequency for this sub. It's down here. You can also transmit on this by hitting split, which is now saying this TX light is lit up on here, and if we TX, we're on that frequency. TX, we're into, no, that's fine. So we're now transmitting on the VFO sub frequency. So all that has been coded for, and it's probably as clear as mud. But it should be right. Fingers crossed. So we've got this TRX container for RX2. We're not going to bother with that. Let's get rid of the big one. Remove that, and we will use this one on the side. There are some very nice meters that Ernst has done all the graphics for, and we'll add them all to this. So we'll have the Magic Eye, the Anand multimeter, we've called it that, and the cross meter. So there are those, and you can obviously position these however you like. You can even create another container with just the cross meter in. You can have the cross meter dim on receive, and all sorts of things. There's shadow options on these needles, so you can get rid of the shadow effect if you don't want that. And I even went to the extreme, if the shadows are overlapping each other, they would dim down so you wouldn't get a real black shadow. It's a bit of overkill, but whatever. And these of course can be undocked, and you can position those on separate screens or however you like, really. Pads, a separate screen, tablets, whatever. Sorry, not the mic. Okay, so let's have a quick look at this. Let's just come down here a bit. There's nothing there, not that I can see anyway. Let's transmit. So let's put a 10 watt tune signal out, but what we can do is we can detune it, so you can see the cross needle meter is working, and Ernst went to great efforts to to fix all those lines so that they were accurate. You can have things like on the cross meter. Well, let's ditch the cross meter. Let's remove that container. On the multimeter, there are things like dark mode. You can alter the color of these secondary needles. So the signal needle, S meter needle, and the forward power needle are the primary ones, and the subs all have the same color. When you're in transmit on this, let's get rid of the eye for a minute. When you're on transmit, this meter has this button here which you can click on. So at the moment it's only showing power and SWR. Okay. What we can do is, instead of show history, we can do peak hold. We can have a dark red on that. So if we do that, so that's a power peak hold meter. We can make it a bit brighter. Orange on the peak hold meter, peak hold needle. But you can click on these to get different values. So that's I think that's comp group, I do believe. You'll see volts and amps, that sort of stuff, and you can have all of them on there at once. The other thing to note about these meters, originally when we were coding up this, we had like 90 images for all the different possible powers that could be in this scale, but I coded up the scale in code so it could be altered, and you can actually change it here. So for instance, if you had an amplifier that only had sort of 20 watts drive or whatever, you could put 20 in here, and then the scale would be, at that point, that's 20, and then it takes it up a bit more. Just like when you're at 100, it's 150. But if you were to have a 8000 Mark II, you could put 500 watts in there, and then you get that. Is limited to 2.5 kilowatt, which we figured that was about the limit of what people wanted to do. If you put 1000 in there, one, it turns into a milliwatt range, and that exists for the other types of meters that are power as well, like forward and reverse. So as you notice, on the forward power and reverse power on this, the scales were both the same. So forward power 100 watts, reverse power 100 watts, which is a bit mad. But on this, you could limit your reverse power scale to be 20 watts, say, and that does that. If you put 1 in, it goes to a milliwatt range. But when you add these, it will attempt to look at your configuration in here for what it thinks your max power would be. So if you had an 8000 in there, it would put 200 watts, but of course there's no way to configure at the moment or do anything for the 8000 Mark II, and this voltage stuff will probably have to be coded for scale, because it'll be, I don't know, 50 volts, will it, or something, on the Mark II 8000, but we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. Have to talk Apache Labs into sending me a test radio. That would be a thing. Anyway, let's get back onto this. So we've had a look at this paste and copy and paste stuff. All different meters we can do, of course. We've had a look at the VFO display. We haven't had a real look at the magic eye. Let's have a quick look at that. Can change the color of the eye, and Ernst has been working on some bezels. some different bezels which will be on his site, on his skin, with his skins and stuff. But you can have different eye scale to bezel scale, because some of the bezels have got bigger surrounds and things, so that can all be tweaked. At the moment it's entirely S meter, so you can have signal average or signal, and when it's fully what we call open, see it's overlapped there, which means that it's more than S9. There's about I forget how much round it goes, about another 25% or something for 60/9, sort of to about there in brightness, but yeah, that's over S9 there. So that's the eye, and of course you can make it fill one of these boxes by setting the eye size to 1, the bezel size to 1, the container. And then you, for instance, if you had some space in your, you had this fixed somewhere on your screen and you had some space there between those controls, you could dock it into Thetis. You could put it over there, say, and then you could do something like, okay, we don't want the background black, we want the background somewhere near what Thetis is. That's too dark, that's too bright, so we go into more colours, and we get somewhere near. That's fairly close, but you can see the outline. Or we can turn the border off. There we go. So you could set something up like that if you wanted. And then if you lock it down to there, because the spread between these changes, it's not going to work perfectly if you're into resizing. But if you have a fixed layout on your screen, which most people do, it would work fine. So yeah, that's I think that's pretty much it. That's covered pretty much everything. Tons of things you can change. Just get used to changing them. Try and minimize. For every single meter you add, is obviously more and more work for it to do. So just be mindful of that. I can't now find it because I've turned the border off. Wherever it's oh, there it is, isn't it? It's still in the window. Oh, we could set the background to black again. Yeah, just be mindful. You know, if you start putting hundreds of meters on, then you'll need a good computer, because it is quite possible to put everything on there all at once, which is it can become quite mad. So yes, and of course everything is in fact working. Let's just go into a dummy load a minute. So yeah, let's just put this on. Testing, Mike Whiskey 0, Lima Golf Echo. So you can see absolutely everything changing there, all over the place. So there we are. Okay, folks, hope you enjoy that. Fingers crossed there won't be too many issues. Let us know in the thread or on GitHub with the problems if you find any. I would imagine there are, because there's a heck of a lot of code behind all this. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Anything else noteworthy that I should mention? Yes, there is one thing actually in what is it? Not OC control and filters here. Force attenuation on transmit to 31 dBs when pure signal A is off. So if you remember, there was a change a while ago where we scrapped that, but there are times when that's a good idea. So that's ticked on my system. So whenever if I have pure signal off and I hit tune now, you'll notice that the step attenuator will automatically hit -31 and then come back, and that's basically what that option does. If you're using pure signal, of course, auto, then it will be changing dynamically. If you something to be wary of, if you turn pure signal off, like that, and then it won't dive the attenuation down to 31 whilst you're in the middle of a transmit. That's turned off. I could add that, but it's not done at the moment. So as you can see, it's stuck at 8 there. But of course, if I did that here, it would jump to negative 31. So that's just to bear in mind. Any other things which are worth mentioning quickly? Not really. I think that's it. Okay, this is 35 minutes already, this video. Alright. As I say, hope you enjoy all that. And you'll have to let us show us some screenshots in the thread with how you've managed to tweak your layouts with the new meters. I am contemplating using this tech for control groups in the Thetis UI and this spectrum area, but that's a lot of work, and unless somebody's got the time to actually do it, it will be a slow process for me. As we're approaching the better months, my free time is usually outdoors, not sat in front of computer programming, so it may be next autumn when that's looked at. I don't know yet, but it's entirely possible. In fact, I did some test, some prototyping where I was using snap spectrum. There's a function in WDSP called snap spectrum, which essentially I can then crop out of that the bandpass, or the passband, sorry, and display it over here or in a separate container. So when you were altering the width of the filters and all that, it was showing more or less of, more or less data. It was working fine, but I think there are some threading issues in that function, which Warren may need to look at. I'll have to contact him. Anyway, I am waffling. Okay, take care guys, cheers for watching, cheers.